My name is Rosemary O'Neill. I'm associate professor and faculty in our graduate program of the History of Design and Curatorial Studies at Parsons and the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. I am delighted to welcome everyone here for our conference, Unruly Design, Making, Changing, and Breaking the Rules. And this is a particularly special event for us because we have 3 graduate programs in our School of Art and Design, History and Theory, Design Studies, Fashion Studies, and the one I mentioned, History of Design and Curatorial Studies. And it's the first time that we have jointly organized a symposium or colloquium together. So it's a rare treat for us to share our faculty and to really come up with interesting panels that touch on both the topics and the methods that we use in our individual graduate programs. So we have a rich offering today, 3 panels: rulemaking, rule changing, rule breaking. And I wanted to just mention that we had a keynote address last night with Paolo Antonelli from MoMA and I forgot his name, Jamer Hunt, Vice Provost of Transdisciplinary Initiatives here at the New School. And they raised a few questions that I think are pertinent to the panels today. One of them is the relationship between rules and constraints in design. The second, thinking about whether those constraints have a link to creativity. And third, how does design and art intervene in the cultural and social norms, the political norms, and certainly controls and regulations in society. So this morning what we'd like to do is to present our panelists all at once. So I'll be listing the names that you see here on the screen. I guess I don't need to do that. But also I'd like to say that we'd like to hold questions and discussions until the end and hope that we have enough time to have a rich intervention from the audience. So our first panelist this morning, as you can see, is Tracy Ehrlich, who is a faculty member in History of Design and Curatorial Studies. Our second speaker is Ulrich Leben, an independent scholar based in Paris. Lauren Downs-Peters from the Center of Fashion Studies at Stockholm University. And Karma Gorman, associate professor in the School of Design and Creative Technologies at the University of Texas, Austin. So please join me in a warm welcome for our speakers today, and we will begin with Tracy.
So last evening, something was said about history. I think that's what I'm doing here today. In 1550, Giorgio Vasari, the Tuscan painter, architect, and historian, called disegno the father of our 3 arts. Learning to draw was the essential foundation of the artist, whether painter, sculptor, or architect. The word disegno implied at once the physical act of drawing and the intellectual process of design. Disegno referred to an object as well as a creative act. Over the course of the next 2 centuries, rules for drawing and thereby training artists were codified, art academies established throughout the Italian peninsula. My paper today addresses the role of disegno within the work of Carlo Marchione. Born in 1702, Marchione was an accomplished sculptor, architect, festival designer, and scenographer, a designer of furnishings, silverware, and visiting cards, and perhaps even a painter. He made his living wage as hydraulic engineer to the papacy, rising to the highest rank in the hierarchy of papal architects, and leaving an indelible mark in Rome in the form of the Villa Albani and the new sacristy of St. Peter's. Marchione was a consummate draftsman who knew all too well the rules of academic drawing. Elected member of the Academy of St. Luke in 1740, the Roman art institution where he taught and rose by 1775 to the position of principe, Marchione nonetheless employed the tools of drawing, graphite, ink, and wash in particular, to challenge academic conventions. This paper explores disegno within the context of 18th century Roman architectural practice, where the rules of drawing were in transition. Marchione produced drawings that were not simply technical solutions or design proposals, but cultural agents, fundamentally generative, experiential, and transformative for viewers. In 1728, Marchione made his precocious debut as Roman architect. Thank you, that's much better. winning his first prize in architecture in the Concorso Clementino, a competition staged at the Academy of St. Luke that culminated in a grand award ceremony graced by the presence of the Pope. The subjects set for architectural contestants in 1728 comprised a piazza set by a harbor, for which Marchionne produced 7 drawings in pen and watercolor. Marchionne was thoroughly schooled in the rules of orthogonal projection and in the conventional academic triad of plan, elevation, and section employed by 18th-century architects. Yet he came of age in an era when the rules of architectural drawing were shifting, when architects such as Filippo Juvara, who won the Concorso in 1705, were bringing color and heightened illusionism into play. Juvara displays his superior control of the draftsman's tools in both his winning design of 1705 at left and his presentation drawing of 1707, donated to the Academy of St. Luke to mark being accepted as a member. In each case, Juvara masterfully represents the ground plan as if it were a separate sheet superimposed on the elevation, weighted down by architects' tools that only partially forestall curling at the edges. Marchionne injects new imaginative potency to the drawings he submitted to the jury in 1728, drawings that exhibit technical facility, but also an urge to stretch the boundaries of academic draftsmanship. His general plan for the harbor is suffused with color that articulates architectural elements while transforming a geometric exercise into a landscape scene. Fictive sheets tacked to the surface supplant the conventional legend, their curling corners suggesting a shifting breeze that ripples across the water surface as well. The plan of the main building appears straightforward. Yet here, as in the detail, the lines of the architect's compass are inked in pink, the geometric framework a feature in a pictorial scheme. See that here. Marchionne cannot resist an illusionistic flourish where the steps of the harbor lead to the sea. In the detailed plan of the building's curved interior court, Marchionne achieves a virtuoso display of illusionism that surpasses Juvara. Held in place by an open compass, the edges of the fictive sheet curl, the paper crisp and feather thin, its materiality instantly apprehended by the viewer. In this period, drawings were displayed for instruction at the Academy of St. Luke. Marchionne underscores the role of disegno in artistic training, but in his hands, the drawing asserts itself as an object with agency of its own, crossing spatial boundaries and replete with creative energy. Even Marchionne's otherwise traditional elevation of the main building is rendered as if drawn on a scroll, unrolled for the viewer, tacked temporarily to the studio table. Since antiquity, display, or in Latin, displicare, meant to unfold or unfurl and implied motion and performance. The conceptual complexity of the term is aptly applied here, where the viewer is not merely a witness, but actively engaged in an experience that unfolds. The inclusion of an architectural veduta as a compelling element of a presentation set was not uncommon by this time. Marchionne, however, transcends the architectural giants of the late Baroque, offering drawings to an academic jury that challenge conventional typologies and play on the dialectic of object and action inherent in the word disegno. In this view of the main building and harbor, Marchionne betrays what became a lifelong interest in landscape, which he pursued in a prodigious output of landscape drawings, as well as an interest in scenography that played out in festival and ephemeral design. Ostensibly an architectural drawing, in this view, the building is a sculptural element, its features carved by light and shadow, the whole subsumed by a swirl of clouds and rippling aquamarine waves that reflect a glimmer of the building. Marchionne's pictorial approach blurs typological boundaries, rendering this drawing not easy to classify, and engages the viewer in a spatial, optical, even emotional experience. Lest the viewer lose himself entirely in this imaginative world, Marchionne leaves reminders that it is but a drawing hung for display. The architect's tools and fictive sheet are strewn on a shelf below, the trompe-l'oeil disrupting the illusion of the picture plane. Marchione's section for the main building with porticoed piazza is playful in much the same way. Like the Veduta, the section, though seemingly more technical with its delineation of building foundations, is depicted as if tacked up on a wall, mostly covering a large niche. A smaller view is pinned on top, its edges curling. A third drawing depicting the scale rests on the sill below, as if momentarily set down by a juror perusing entries at the concorso. Marchione is acutely aware of the way drawings were displayed and discussed in the Roman architectural world, both tools of instruction and marks of professional accomplishment. Equally important, he asserts the materiality of the drawing, an active, moving, vibrant thing that orchestrates the experience of the viewer. Marchione's 1728 prize-winning drawings could be dismissed as the product of youthful bravado, unfettered by membership in the Academy, which was forthcoming only 12 years later. However, a sample of Marchione's work produced over the course of his lengthy and prolific career speaks to a lasting commitment to challenging the rules, even as he practiced within and eventually presided over the Academy of St. Luke. Marchione's bread and butter derived from his employment as hydraulic engineer to the papacy, a specialty that in this period remained the purview of architects. In a 1735 survey of the bridges of Rome and the river Tiber, set forth in a series of 7 drawings, Marchione again coupled the technical with the pictorial. In this rendering of the Ponte Sisto, Marchione inks in technical information in red and includes a section of the bridge that draws attention to structure and materials. Quick strokes of wash to evoke the movements of river and sky, together with figural vignettes, transform the whole into a scenic landscape. Marchione offers multiple viewpoints in a set of scrolls unrolled as if on the architect's table, the longest sheet throwing a shadow across the brown ink frame of the drawing underneath. In a similar rendering of the so-called Ponte Rotto, Marchione blends the technical with the pictorial and layers illusionistic sheets that assert their presence in the space of the viewer. One sheet is tacked up for display, the pin throwing a calculated shadow, just as we saw in the Concorso set. Another, much larger sheet is unfurled by the action of a flying angel wielding her trumpet of fame. The angel appears to have blown in from another type of drawing altogether, but whatever her origins, her centrality to the image is unmistakable. In this, as in other works, Marchione underscores the performative nature of disegno, an object that registers and communicates ideas, a physical action, and a process of creative invention. In Marchione's hands, object and process, thing and action are conflated. Whatever its practical purpose, the drawing is nothing less than an experiential art form. Intermingling the technical and pictorial, Marchione's drawings resist classification and are exceptionally imaginative. What is radically new in Marchione's architectural renderings is, however, not simply the transgression of typological boundaries, it is the attention to body and gesture. Minuscule figures featured in vignettes, as you see here, most likely imported from the tradition of urban and landscape views, are writ large in many an architectural drawing Marchione executed during his 6-decade career. In 1750, for example, Marchione produced a set of 18 drawings and lengthy report as the hydraulic expert charged with assessing damage to papal conduits. In this series, Marchione offers a factual study in the form of a visually striking display, measurements and notations combined with a vibrant green wash that renders the hydraulic problem unmistakable. So here, for example, this is not what is supposed to happen. All this water is gushing out of the conduits, and this poor guy is standing ankle deep in water. Figures measure, point, and converse, enacting the process of evaluation. Some hold the tools of their trade, such as the measuring rod or plumb line, while a well-dressed Marchione carries at all times a book of drawings beneath one arm. Here he is, for example, here again, and with the measuring instruments. These figures are too impressive to be elements inserted merely for scale. Why then does Marchione foreground bodies, almost always in conversation, which appear nowhere else in the European tradition of architectural drawing? At the bottom, you can see an example of a hydraulic survey by Carlo Fontane. You see it's very straightforward, no figures, and then Marchione, of course, above. In Marchione's hydraulic renderings, measuring and assessment is an occasion for conversation, not only between professionals of equivalent status, but between Marchione and manual artisans. And you can see him multiple times. There he is in discussion with the artisans who are measuring. There is an intensity of conversation as Marchione bends over, for example, either to listen or to instruct, that suggests its generative power. So there he is with his drawings, deep in discussion, and this happens multiple times in this series. That sociability is essential to the practice of architecture is implied in numerous works by Marchione, including drawings for the gallery of the Villa Albani, the project of the 1750s that made his reputation and solidified his favor with Cardinal Alessandro Albani, leading tastemaker of Rome. Drawings within drawings are prominent in Marchione's repertoire, but particularly notable here is the way that conversations are performed around drawings. In a detail for the Albani Gallery, Marchione depicts himself in dialogue with an artisan, marked by his humble clothing and relaxed posture. So there's Marchione, and there's his conversation partner. The elegant Marchione has removed his tricorn hat in a sign of respect. He opens out a sheaf of drawings, bends his knee, and leans in intently to hear the words of his partner, whose open-handed gesture compels our attention. At the top of the stack of drawings is a sketch of a pediment. You can just see it here. Perhaps a proposal for the overdoor of the gallery portal, which appears in a fragment that's long since been pulled apart from these other three. Here and elsewhere, Marchione injects himself into his renderings, positioning himself with drawings in hand or tucked beneath his arm, absorbed in conversation with patrons, peers, and craftsmen alike. There he is again. Although he hints at the experience of beauty as distinct to a cultural elite, Marchione makes clear the foundational role drawing played in all of the arts and at all levels of the artistic ladder. Self-referential imagery was nothing new in the 18th century. Marchione's original contribution to the history of disegno rests on his conception of the social role of the body in early modern space. It is an eloquence of the body, in particular the art of civil conversation, which marks the architectural drawings of Marchione as unique. In the case of the Albani Gallery, this series of drawings, highly finished, though unsigned, hover between the genre of presentation drawing and paintings and drawings known in the 18th century as conversation pieces, such as this one. The latter feature interior spaces whose furnishings and inhabitants, particularly their dress, bodily comportment, and gestures, conveyed social relationships and social meanings. In Marchione's renderings, the gallery threshold is animated by figures in fashionable dress. They are outfitted with the trappings of gentility, including the cane, sword, and three-sided hat of the 18th century gentleman, and fan of the distinguished gentlewoman. Civility is inscribed in the body through fashionable dress and fine movements, and in the building through ornament, in particular Albani's prized Roman relief and heraldic eagle, poised as if about to take flight. Worked up with exquisite attention in pen and wash, the figures and ornament overshadow the graphite lines of the architecture. Marchione offers his audience a visual manual of comportment that underscores the importance of conversation to civil society. At the same time, the very rules of etiquette and gesture work to upend the conventional form and function of architectural drawing. The corporeal eloquence displayed in the Albani set is integral to Marchione's lifelong concern for social relationships and social spaces, an argument that I've made elsewhere, but I will compress here to a few final points. Marchione belonged to an international culture of civility in Grand Tour Europe, a shared language of bodily comportment, gesture, and fashion disseminated in printed texts and visual imagery. Marchione's figures reveal their civility in a way that corresponds to techniques for the social control of the body prescribed by etiquette manuals. In his drawings, finely tuned, moving, gesturing figures enact social relations, which often, though not always, includes talk. Bodies in motion activate space, engaging the viewer. Gestures and movements suggest discourse, but the audience must supply the words or text, for a narrative in the conventional sense has been eliminated. The intensity of the conversational pair at left, for example, who pore over a drawing for the portal, the Albani eagle spreading its wings. You can see they're talking about this portal, offers a commentary on the way drawings were linked to sociable practices. In Marchione's architectural renderings, the creative actions of moving bodies, often taking the form of conversations generated around drawings and works of art, call social space into being. Marchione was conscious of the ways his drawings were discussed and employed, whether circulated among friends and acquaintances, used for instruction, or displayed by his patrons. His drawings did not simply reflect contemporary practices of sociability, they actively encouraged them. Marchione's figures are unexpected protagonists in the work of an 18th-century architect and draftsman. Throughout his large and varied repertoire is a consistency of theme. Conversation draws viewers into and through the fictive spaces of architectural renderings. Richly modeled with pen and ink, brush and wash, figures enact the spatial component of sociability. Gesture replaces text as a source of meaning, encouraging viewers to reflect upon human relationships and imagine the particulars of discourse. Nuanced social and professional distinctions are revealed through movement, posture, dress, and accessories. In Marchione's work, conversation is a social space inhabited by all members of society. Conversation points to the importance of social bonds for the production of learning and knowledge. Equally important, it is open-ended, giving free play to the imagination of viewers. Marchione was mindful of the way his drawings in particular and works of art in general inspired conversation and creativity. By inserting himself and his drawings into his own renderings, Marchione invokes artistic production and makes a claim for architectural representation as an active agent in the formation of culture. Marchione's sociable bodies underscore a creative confluence of conversation and drawing. Conversation, like disegno, is a generative, experiential process, whereas we 21st century moderns think of conversation as discourse. For the early modern architect Carlo Marchione, conversation served as a metaphor for everything creative about culture itself. Thank you.